MHA McIntyre Hudson are members of the REA, the Renewable Energy Association. We find this hugely beneficial to aid our understanding and assist our clients in the renewable space. So with the run-up to the COP26 summit, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Mark Sommerfeld from the REA to join us today. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Rachel.
So, Mark, what do you think your predictions are for coming out of COP26? What do you hope to see?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that COP26, it's a massive conference. It's a global conference. There's going to be lots of very high-level discussions. And there's also going to be a lot of countries trying to make really strong commitments to what they would like to see happen around what was the Paris Agreement, this 1.5 degrees target for net zero by 2050. So what does that mean in terms of announcements? Well, we'll probably see a lot of countries coming out with their nationally determined commitments. These are the commitments that they're making to decarbonize their economies by 2030. We're also likely to see quite a lot around what Boris would like to term as coal, cash, cars and trees. So these are commitments to reducing coal usage and committing to moving away from coal completely. Looking at the cash, so this is money especially to developing countries and helping them to decarbonize. And then cars, big topic right now, how do we decarbonize our transport systems? And then finally also trees, how do we increase the growth of our carbon stocks, which we can talk about as growing more trees and but generally looking after our environment better and seeing a better environmental outcome. So those are going to be the key subjects that are going to be talked about. Those are going to be some of the key announcements that are coming forward. But of course, there's an awful lot of debate and negotiation that has to happen with all of that in the next 2 weeks.
And so in terms of our clients, do you think there'll be actual details that they'll be able to start planning their businesses on from the outcome of COP26, or do you think it's going to be more high-level targets and then that's going to be coming out over the coming months and years?
I think it's going to be a fair mixture. So it is going to be these high-level announcements. We already know that. We know that there's going to be an awful lot of discussion between countries and what they want to commit to. But as we've already seen in the last 2 weeks in the run-up to COP, this is a real opportunity for the UK government in particular to be showing their leadership and announcing policies that really drive forward decarbonisation in the UK. So in the last week or so, we've had the net zero strategy, we've had the heat and building strategy. We might see further things in the budget, which will be announced today as we speak. So we know there will be significant pieces of policy from a UK context coming out, and we also expect to see that coming from intergovernment organisations as well. What does that really mean though for a business? Well, what they should be looking at, the announcements from COP, is really the direction of travel. So we know that there'll be lots of discussion around things like carbon pricing and how as a global entity, we start to link up carbon markets and think about how carbon pricing is done not only within economies but across economies, as has already been done in the EU, but furthering the extent of that. We also know there's going to be a lot of discussion around business transparency and what requirements there is going to be on businesses to be reporting their sustainability commitments and how they are and how are they disclosing what they're actively doing to reduce their carbon emissions. So there is a clear direction of travel that we will be seeing from these discussions. They might not automatically lead into direct policy in the next 2 weeks, but we can be sure that it sets a direction for where we are headed in the next 12 months and indeed further on to 2030 and 2050.
Yeah, it's a challenging time for businesses, I think. Our clients coming from the back of Brexit, the pandemic, they've had losses, many clients, and they're trying to sort of bring their war chests back to life at the moment. Cash is a challenge, they've delayed investment in infrastructure. So I think, they're also seeing a huge amount of pressure down the supply chain from the larger corporates, instilling green policies, requiring green net zero compliance to become suppliers. So I think it's a really challenging time for businesses anyway, and I think there is a real clients want to do it, but I think there's going to need to be some support, in not just in cash terms, but in terms of advice and where they go to be able to really deliver. And I suppose it's going to take all of us, and every business, every person is going to have to make a change here.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true. I think the government also, to an extent, understand that. Everyone knows the difficulties of the last year and a half, and the pressures that have been on businesses. And it is also fair to say that as a result of that, where there might have been more money to spend on decarbonisation previously, the priorities now might have changed, at least in the short term. But I think what we've also seen out the back of the pandemic, and as businesses have come back, is a recognition of not wanting to just repeat the mistakes of the past. So wanting to build back better, as the government's favourite phrase right now is around this. And wanting to see real commitments from business in how they recover from the pandemic in a more sustainable fashion. There are going to have to be more policies to enable businesses to do that. So we have seen the strategy documents that have come out from the UK government in the last 2 weeks. Things like the heat and building strategy have committed to further funding and further grants to helping businesses in particularly decarbonise their heat. We've also seen announcements around electric vehicles and electric vehicle mandates to see the decarbonisation of transport. However, we would be lying to say if there were really strong, firm policy vehicles there that are really going to deliver on those ambitions. An awful lot still needs to be done. There are quite significant policy gaps, especially around the commercial and industrial decarbonisation area. So this is going to be an area that it is correct for business to be saying, we want to do this, we see the direction this is happening in, but we still need further support from government in order to do that, and need to be talking around what kind of policies can really see that delivered. And that can be in the form of subsidy support, that can be in the form of direct fiscal support, but it's also worth remembering what can happen around the tax regimes as well, and maybe where tax rebates or tax allowances might make an even bigger difference in helping businesses to decarbonise and change the way that they do things. So that is a live discussion, but the direction of travel is very clear, and I think most businesses are now on board with that as well.
Yeah, they are. It'd be interesting to see what the Chancellor manages to announce. A bit of pressure on him to come up with some green policies amidst sorting the economy out. So finally, Mark, David Attenborough has said he believes this COP26 summit is the last chance for us all to really save the planet. How hopeful are you of that outcome? Do you think it can really deliver that?
I think I have a kind of cautious optimism around the outcomes of this COP summit. Obviously within the press, and David Attenborough is absolutely right to build this up as the press are doing, and highlight the urgency that it is needed to make these commitments and get these negotiations agreed across nations, across governments, and really setting that direction. But at the same time, it is also important to remember that this is an iterative process. This is not a once in a lifetime COP summit. These summits happen annually. They are continuing discussions between nations. There is going to be a process of not only setting plans and strategies and commitments, but also making sure that those strategies are reviewed and making sure that they remain aligned to the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degree target. So this is going to be a constant discussion. It's going to be a constant iterative process, which I would really encourage businesses to get involved in. Just relying on this one summit to say it's going to solve everything is clearly not how this is going to happen. It is right that big announcements will be made, that big directions will be set, but this is going to take more work to actually get down into the weeds and see how this is delivered. And if business are at the forefront of that and saying, this is how we want it to be delivered, this is what we plan to do, then that gives a really strong arm to the government to say, okay, we can put these commitments in place. This is what we can say at the international level, and this is how we can prove our leadership. So it is all part of the picture. It is all part of that discussion. There is an urgency, but there is also an ongoing discussion that will have to happen.
Thank you, Mark. That's been absolutely brilliant for our clients. I'm sure they'll enjoy watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.